something outside.
What is that?
Montra X Radio.
Good evening, Montra X Radio listeners. This is Gunnar Monson, your host tonight for Montra X Radio. I want to remind everybody that's out there listening to go to our website, www.monstraxradio.com, and check out our new Monster exclusive content. You got to join to see it, but a lot of good, cool stuff in there. So with me tonight is Kyle Gibson, Montra Freitas, and Todd and Diane Neiss. Todd, are you there?
Hello. I am.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, we're excited to have you. A few weeks ago, Kyle and Montra were actually up snowmobiling up in Washington State, and came across something interesting, which they took some photographs of. And the reason I originally reached out to you, Todd, because we happened to have lunch shortly thereafter, and you shared some pictures with me. And I'll let Kyle and Montra tell the story of how what happened and what they were doing and how those came about. It's always cool to get the context of any piece of evidence when it comes to Bigfoot research. Any single piece of evidence without the context is almost worthless, unless you have a body. I guess that would be the exception. Kyle and Montra, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah, we're here.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me tonight on Monster X. Kyle, let's start with you. Can you tell the Monster X radio audience what your background is and how you got into Bigfoot research?
Well, I come from a family of outdoors people. We do a lot of hunting and fishing. We grew up hunting and fishing, and spending most of our time outside in the mountains. My grandfather was an avid tracker and hunter and fisherman, and most of my family are all in the game department, fishing and hunting. And so I grew up around just being outside, spending a lot of time in the woods in the Pacific Northwest, all over the state. When I was younger, at about 11 years old, I had my first sighting in the Blue Mountains when I was bow hunting. And after that first sighting, I was very interested and kind of kept going back to it. I was so excited because, these creatures are not supposed to be there. And then when you get a glimpse of something, you kind of go back and you're just like, well, all these people say that there's no such thing. And after that, it just kind of takes over, and you just want to know more and more and more, and you want to learn and understand what these creatures are. Ever since then, I've been just kind of, I continued my hunting and I continued my fishing and spending a lot of time outside. But every time I go out hunting or fishing, not only was I hunting or fishing, I was always checking the surroundings, looking for footprints, following up, talking to people, talking to other hunters, talking to some of the old timers that were trappers, trackers, and asking them, hey, have you ever had an experience like this? Where did you have an experience like this? And, just kind of like taking my situation and what I saw and what other people have seen and just kind of putting it together. And the more you talk to people, the more interesting it gets. You start seeing a pattern here that, hey, you're not the only one that has seen one of these. Ever since then, it just kind of became an addiction. And after that, I was pretty much just going out I was going out 2-3 days a week at least, every week. I'd make sure that I was off before Friday and I was in the mountains until Monday. So that's how it started with me.
Well, it's always interesting to me, people's background stories, because there's certain people that this encounter changes their life in a way that it becomes a pursuit. You know, when people have, I call it the confirmation experience, they go from are they to what are they? You know, it's looking, now that these things are out there and they've been eluding man all this time to a great degree. We haven't been able to prove they exist, but obviously people have experiences with them. It's just fascinating, and some people do have, you know, your mindset that, like Todd, who's at a sighting, it becomes a big part of their lives. And other people just want, you know, it's like, I did not see Bigfoot. Why do you think that there's different approaches for people? I mean, what affects some people so dramatically in the other way? Like, there's people that won't go back in the woods after they've had an encounter.
Well, I think it just depends on what kind of person you really are, because, you know, fear can do a lot of things to people, you know. If you've been in those situations, fear can take over, and you got to be really careful. Even when you're in the woods and you're hunting and you hear things, you know, just because you hear something doesn't mean you know. I mean, there's all kinds of different animals out there. There's, you know, bear, elk, cougar, all those different animals. They all have different agendas. You know, they feed at certain times. They go to the river at certain times. They migrate at certain times. They follow the food chain. I think a lot of people, maybe some of those people that do that, maybe they saw something, but they're not sure what they saw. And I always tell people it's like this. It's like driving down the freeway, and you're in rush hour, and 3 of your buddies from kindergarten that you've known for over 20 years are 4 feet away from you in another car, and they're sitting there looking at you, but you got an agenda, and you're going to work, and you're just oblivious of what's going on all around you. You drive right by all your friends. It's kind of the same thing.
So, Montra, let's get a little bit of background on your interest in Bigfoot and any experience that you've had.
Okay. Actually, let me preface this by saying I have a cough, so forgive me for, like, hacking right in the middle of talking. So,
Okay.
When I was right around 12 or 13 years old, I had a sighting out in the woods out in Tuolumne County in California of something, and I don't want to say it was a Sasquatch, but it was definitely something that was not a bear and it was not a person. But that absolutely terrified me when I was a kid, and I didn't tell anybody about it until years and years later. Back in 1999, I was talked into contacting the BFRO by my oldest brother, Kevin, and so I contacted them and put a report in saying, yeah, I had this experience when I was a kid, you know, blah, blah. And I got a call back from Kathy Strain, who at that time I'd never met. Her and I got to talking. She was one of the investigators for the BFRO at the time. And her and I started going out together into the field and doing our own investigations. And at that time, there weren't really a whole lot of women that were going out and doing that. There was just a handful. Diane, of course, and Bobby Short, and maybe just a few others that I don't know. They're just random, you know, they weren't out there all the time. But anyway, so at that time, it was really cool because there weren't that many women doing it, and it was kind of interesting to compare the results that we would get with other groups, especially, you know, mostly men. So anyhow, that's kind of how it all started. I became part of the BFRO and for a few years, and then dropped out. And Kathy and I went on to do a couple of Bigfoot boot camp kind of training things, teaching people how to cast prints and how to look for evidence, and the chain of command. You know, when you do find some evidence, how to keep it pristine so that you're not actually contaminating it. You know, our opinions basically on everything. Not that that's the end all by any means, but just what we had learned up until that point. And anyway, from there to the point I'm at now with Kyle and him and I, like he was saying, I mean, we go out and do field work at least, I mean, at the minimum 2 times a week, if not more like 3 times a week, sometimes, you know, more than that. It's just depending on our time frames. But we're really trying to get as much time as we can out in the field to gather as much evidence as we can. And even when it's uncomfortably cold, like out in the snow, we're still going out and doing things. And it's really been a lot of fun. And it's so nice to have somebody with this kind of experience too. I mean, Kyle's knowledge base is just vast. So because he knows all these areas out here, he knows more about these creatures than most anybody I've ever met. So anyhow, so we've been working on the Columbia Sasquatch Facebook page and putting some stuff out there, which is where actually that picture is right now that we got.
Well, let's talk about that. That's a good segue into what picture are we talking about. So you guys were out, and at the time you were actually looking for evidence. Is that correct? I mean, you were actually out hoping to find something.
Right. It's an area. We have a bunch of different areas that we frequent, and so we just, in order to kind of keep them sort of semi to ourselves as far as where they are exactly, we just call them different zones. Like that particular one was what, zone 5, zone 2? I don't remember which one. I have to look it up and see. We've got so many now; it's hard to keep track. But so we were out there. And we had been there before and really got some good evidence before. There's just some amazing stuff up there. I'm being from California, and I'm a transplant here in Washington now, where I live with Kyle. And just the difference in the evidence factor is so huge. I mean, granted, there's some really good places in California, but up here it's just intense. It's really different.
It's very squatchy.
It's extremely squatchy, and
to steal a phrase,
it's like squatchiness on testosterone. I mean, it's just amped up about 9 levels, So, but yeah, we've gotten some really good evidence of prior. So we went back up looking, to kind of see what we could find that time, and yeah, we went out on a snowmobile, and we have kind of different methods of trying to cover as much as we can at the same time. So, when Kyle, of course, is driving the snowmobile, and I'm on the back, and he's looking to the left, so I'm looking to the right. And then when he looks to the right, I look to the left. So we're kind of coordinating, scanning as much as we can of the woods and stuff and the tree lines as we're going.
We're looking for movement, a lot of times it'll be a deer or an elk. Sometimes it'll be coyotes, different things. But if you go slow enough, we'll go slow, and I'll take one side of the road, and then she'll take the other side of the road. And if we see movement, then we stop and we check it out and see what it is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this specific incident. You guys were out snowmobiling and scanning the sides of the road, and what happened? You saw something made you stop.
Right. We were going along, and Kyle saw some movement over to the right. And so he stopped, and we backed up. And
yep. And just a little bit earlier, before we saw that one, we saw some movement, and we both saw something similar about a mile before that. Mm-hmm. And it caught our eye, and we both looked at each other like, "Did you see that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I saw it. Did you see that?" But then when we turned back to go look to see what that was, it wasn't there.
Yeah, it was gone.
And then we went down the road a little bit further, and that's when I saw movement. And so I stopped the snowmobile, and I backed up, and I said, "Montra, look at that." And she goes, "Oh, my gosh." And she grabbed her phone out and snapped off some pictures. And then we sat there for a bit, and she wanted to get off the snowmobile and go down there. But you're up on a road, and when you come over the bank, the snow is probably about 6 feet, 7 feet deep. And then there's a little stream that runs under that you can't see that's underneath the snow. And right. I grabbed her. I said, "You're not going down that hill. You disappear. Seriously, you will disappear in that snowbank. You'll just drop off." And I mean, even stopping up on the road, we got stuck 3 times where the back of the snowmobile, once you stop on that, because it's starting to melt, the back end of the snowmobile would sink 3.5 feet, and then you got to lift the thing up without sitting on it and throttle it to get it out of the hole.
Yeah, it's no fun digging out a snowmobile, let me tell you right now.
Yeah.
Thank God Kyle's strong enough to pull that thing out.
And it took me 2 hours a couple times.
God.
I mean, I was running out of energy. I was to the point of where I was about ready to just get underneath it and let her drive it over the top of me.
Yeah. So get our shoes off and.
So you guys stopped. You backed. You saw something moving. You stopped and backed up and took some pictures. I mean, the context of the story is you guys are actually out looking for something. You did, and then you see something. You stop and take pictures. What did you see in those pictures that was interesting?
Well, first it was the movement, and then what we saw was like wow factor because, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and you coming across life like hitting a lottery. Honestly, I mean,
it still is. Yeah,
it's like hitting a lottery. I mean, at first I was like, no way, this ain't happening. This in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, no. You don't just go out there and look and get lucky like that. I mean, I've been doing this for years. And then I looked at Montra, and she's like, oh my gosh, and she's the one. She's already got the phone out snapping pictures before I could even.
I'm the Bigfoot paparazzi.
You know, yeah, she is. And then we're both looking at each other like, God dang, you know. And she wants to go down there after, and I'm like, no, you ain't gonna go down there because I'm not gonna go dig you out when you disappear, you know.
They're just at the top of my head.
Yeah. Let alone what's going to happen if you actually get up to what's you think is a Bigfoot.
This is the problem with that is you and I both know is that can go bad. That can go bad a couple different ways, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, but you know what though? If I didn't try to chase after it, I would always regret it. So, you know, you get
that's
so
pretty gutsy. I mean, you know, most people when they think they see a Bigfoot, that's not their first inclination. Is that hey, I think I'll run after it. I mean, that really is not.
Gosh, let's get out of here.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you only get so many opportunities, if ever, you know. I mean, in your
Right.
lifetime, and I have when I was a kid, and it scared me to death, and now as an adult, if I, you know, if and when I'm afforded another opportunity like that, I'm going to go and I'm going to jump on its back and grab some hair and DNA and run the hell out.
Well, that's what and please don't try this at home, folks. we do not advise people to go out and chase Bigfoot and pull their hair. It's kind of like, you know, spitting into the wind or pulling on Superman's cape. So, but the idea is, I mean, that, you know, we all that are out and looking for Bigfoot, and I don't know, I think Diane has had an encounter too. Diane, is that correct? Am I only one on here that hasn't seen Bigfoot? I mean, that's
no, dear. Yeah, I have not seen one either.
Okay, good. I'm not. I don't feel so bad. But the thing is
you're not
there's
in the club.
Yeah, not yet. But the thing is that you never know. You know, you don't know how you're going to react when something actually happens. You know, we have these ideas of, well, I'll do this or that, but when something actually happens, how do you actually react? And it sounded like, you know, you had given this some thought prior to this incident, and had decided that if you ever saw one, your instinct would be to pursue it, which is unusual. But I guess that's the best way to collect evidence is go to where the evidence is. So talk about what you saw and then what showed up in these photographs.
Well, basically what the photograph shows is what we saw, which was it appears to be something that is
tall,
very tall and hairy, and not really trying to hide itself 100%. Like it's not just a tree peeker, looking up from behind the big tree or anything. It's actually kind of standing. You can see it. So
to me, because I did see it move before I saw where it was. To me, I think we caught it off guard, and it was just like, okay, I got to freeze up now, and hopefully these people will just go by,
Hey, Kyle, can I ask you a quick question? So, and I think Gunnar has the same question. This movement that you saw, can you describe it? Was it moving with you? Was it moving away from you? Did it look bipedal, quadrupedal? Can you describe that?
Well, I was looking. So we were coming down towards going back, and so I was watching that side of the road, and I come around the bend, and I'm always watching, for movement, and I saw a dark figure moving through the trees. At first, I thought maybe an elk, could be a deer or something, because when you're moving along there and you see something move, usually whatever does that usually will stop. Just like an elk or deer, a lot of times they're moving and they'll just come to a stop. Well, I saw this thing move out of the corner of my eye, and I saw that it was big and it was dark, and that's when I was like, whoa. I mean, I stopped the snowmobile, I put it in reverse, and I backed up.
So, just so the audience understands, these snowmobiles are two-stroke gas oil mix, fairly loud machines. And this is what kind of gets me, is that you can hear a snowmobile. If you were standing there where they were, you would hear a snowmobile from probably at least a quarter, if not, 1/8 mile away or whatever. It's coming.
Yep.
And I find it interesting that rather than flee to get away from that sound, they stood their ground until you were right up on them. I think that speaks a lot to perhaps their intelligence, and by that I mean their inquisitiveness. I'm sure it's not the first snowmobile they heard in their lives, but the fact that they, hung out and waited to see exactly who and what was making that noise tells me that they're, to have that curiosity overwhelm their fear factor. That to me says a lot about they're intelligent.
Very.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's snowmobiles up there, I would say. I mean, Todd, you and Diane, of course, were up there with us after that, and you saw, too, that there's tracks. People go up there. I'd say maybe there's got to be at least one snowmobile per day up there, I would think. It's kind of a well-traversed area, even though it kind of goes way out. But so I would think they're probably used to hearing snowmobiles at this time of year.
But not everybody is looking for them, so obviously it looked. And I've had the good fortune to see the pictures. In fact, I got to see one on a giant screen, and it's even more impressive when you're able to see it that big. It gets a little pixelated, but I mean, the first there's some detail in those pictures that, it looks like you're looking at what people describe as a Bigfoot. I mean, that obviously it's not the glamour shot that everybody hopes for, that they didn't pose but there's so you watched this, you saw this movement, you saw the thing behind the tree, and that's a fairly regularly reported behavior, is that they'll cover themselves, they'll use the cover that's there. I've heard stories of them, being in brush and pulling branches down in front of them to try and conceal themselves to some degree when somebody's looking at them. So you look at it, you take some pictures, then what? Montra's going to take off after it. You say that's probably not a good idea. Then what do you guys do?
I got reeled in.
You could just tie a rope around her and let her, go for it. But maybe next time.
Now, you realize I've been going up to that spot. We have a cabin not very far from there, but I've been going up to that spot for many, many, many years. And out of all those years, I've always came across those footprints up there. There's it's more than one of them. There's a group up there. And first time I took Montra up there too, we found 3 different sizes of prints. And I'm talking not just 1 or 2 tracks. I'm talking hundreds of tracks.
There were so many prints up there that were so good and pristine that I just finally gave up taking pictures. I'm like, I've got 30 pictures already, different prints, so I'm kind of running out of steam here, It was amazing, really amazing. We didn't have any casting material with us at the time, and it was mud, but like mud that had drained, so the detail was really, really good.
And you could see that they're eating, that they drained the lake down, that they're eating, so you see a lot of crawfish shells and stuff, and you could see that they'd been eating, there was signs of a lot of like frogs eating and crawfish and stuff like that, and so they were picking through there. And the thing is at that time of year, this is this happened last year too. So we know they're up there.
Yeah.
Hey,
so
Kyle,
this is an area that has history of Bigfoot activity. I mean, and it's an area that you frequent. So that's I like the way the stories come. I mean, you weren't just up there. It wasn't a random activity. You were up there for a specific purpose.
Yep.
Right.
Gunnar, if I may, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think as a segue, Kyle has some other background that needs to be told, and that is the relationship with Bob Gimlin, which goes way, way, way back. And also, Kyle, if you don't mind, you had mentioned that you had talked to Bob recently, and he had mentioned that he was familiar with a number of sightings up in that area, a family, if you will. But can you maybe give us a little bit of your background going back to your rodeo days and just how long you've known Bob Gimlin? And I think that's important to the story.
Okay. Well, I've known Bob Gimlin for a long time. Roger Patterson's brother, Les Patterson, was my rodeo trainer. And so I used to steer wrestle, what they call it bulldogging. I used to steer wrestle for the Pattersons over here in Pasco, Washington, and when I was a kid. And so I knew Bob. And me and Bob comes up to the cabin every now and then, and we talk and stuff. But he goes up there too, and he's very aware. In fact, last weekend I was with Bob, and I was showing him the pictures. And Bob was like, "Oh yeah, those ones, we've been coming across those ones for years." And I go, "Oh yeah," I said, "there's a small one, that's about this size, and then there's a medium one, there's a bigger one." And he knows all about them too. And we were talking about them, kind of like there's a few individuals where he's been kind of watching them for quite a few years too. There's a lot of history back there in that area there, and that's why Bob comes up and frequently goes up there too.
How old were you when you first met Bob?
I was about 20.
Very cool.
So
known each other a long time.
Yep.
So that's also another awesome piece to the puzzle is there's corroboration. There's somebody else that is aware of the area and happens to be one of the godfathers of Bigfooting, but it's building. I mean, I look at this as it's building a case. In this area, you've got individuals, and you've established that there's numerous different individuals that are in the area by the footprint record. What other kind of evidence have you guys gotten out of this area?
Well, not just that area, but that whole area quite a ways down, even further away from there. There's another area that we go to frequently that I snowmobile, and actually it's written in a couple of books. It's the Bethel Ridge area. I've been up there a lot of times snowmobiling. They have this little trail called Little Rattlesnake Trail. And about 5 years ago, my youngest son, we'd go up there and go snowmobiling, and so he has a snowboard, and I'd tie a rope onto the back of the snowmobile, and I'd pull him through the mountain, and we'd just go up there, and we'd go like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and go through those mountains, and we went through there one time, and it was beautiful. I mean, no wind, no snow or nothing. And we were up there, and we were kind of playing all night, and then we went back to the cabin. We got about 4 hours of sleep, and we got up, went back to the same trail, and there had been no wind or nothing. And on that same trail, there was these large trees pushed over the snowmobile trail. And I'm not kidding you. I walked over to those trees to see, well, is it snowpack that brought them down, or are the trees kind of rotten or something? And these trees were in great condition, and for some reason, after we left that night, I found 3 of them over my trail. I had to cut them to move them out of the way so we could continue snowmobiling that day. And
did you look for or any footprints or anything around the trees at the time?
There was footprints around the trees at those times. There was footprints around the trees, yes. And but the weird thing,
that's awesome.
the weird thing about it was those trees. I don't know how anything could have that much strength to push a tree like that. I mean, a bear couldn't do that. I mean, these trees, there was no rot, and the way they were busted, and they weren't busted towards the bottom. I mean, they were busted at about 6-7 foot tall level is where the tree was pushed, and it looked like something just snapped it. I mean, I don't know what could do that. And like I said, we were only gone out there maybe 5 hours, and we'd only been gone out of there 5 hours, and come back to seeing these big trees just laying. I mean, out of all the places, there's no trees laying down anywhere else, but they're laying over our snowmobile road, which the road is like 10 feet wide. Why would these trees be laid over our trail, saying that basically, to me, it's like, we don't want you in here, you know? And it's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. That's another good encounter story. I mean, it's interesting because some of those behaviors, the looking from behind a tree, using a tree as cover, and trees being over trails and roads and stuff in areas where people have gone through, and there seems to be no natural explanation for why the tree would be across the road. I also have an appreciation for it. It sounds like you don't go out in the woods and everything is Bigfoot. That, you know. No,
I'm an outdoor. I always tell everybody, you know, I said I just go out there because I love to be outside, and I'd rather be outside doing things. And if you see something, that's a plus. If you don't, not a big deal. But at least you're outside.
And not everything is Bigfoot related. I mean, at all. I mean, there's a lot of trees that fall certain ways, that look a certain way. There's a lot of things that happen out in the woods that, you know, people are going to say, oh, that looks like a Bigfoot did it. And unless you saw a Bigfoot do it, it probably didn't happen.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to note, and the kind of rule of thumb that Diane and I practice is eliminate every other possibility.
Yep.
And
exactly.
if you know, if it's a weather phenomenon, you know, snow buildup, ice, wind, whatever. If it, you know, you've got to eliminate every other possibility before you can even come close to the possibility that it's something else. And and that's kind of the no pun intended. That's kind of the mantra that we.
But when you spend that much time out there, and you know what things happen out there, when something like that does happen, it's the wow factor, because
that is unusual.
You've been out there your whole life. You know what snowfall does. You know what animals do, and you, like you said, you go through there and you eliminate everything it could be, and then at the end, sometimes there's something that's just like, this does not add up. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't add up.
Right. I mean, unless there was some spontaneous weather event that, you know, came through and snapped trees in that precise area that felled them right. I mean, sometimes the alternate explanation seems more fantastic than the fact that it could have been a Bigfoot. I mean, like some swirling wind came in and ripped those trees down in the time that you guys were gone, and they just happened to fall right across the road.
Gunnar, honey, if I can add something to that, being from back east, where you have a ton of little tornadoes, downdrafts and microbursts, I've witnessed myself trees being twisted off and broken off just from wind. So, I've seen it plenty of times. So when somebody says a Bigfoot twisted this tree off, the first thing that comes to my mind is weather.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Diane's my favorite skeptic, and she keeps me in check. But no, it's true. But I mean, when you find something that's isolated, where everything else in the area, you know, if you get into an area where there's other trees exactly like the trees that are affected, that for whatever reason, in the midst of these, say a grove of trees, where you have some sort of activity that has caused damage, and just specifically, like Kyle's saying, along the road, and I've seen it before, you've got to ask yourself, why am I not seeing that in all the surrounding area?
Yep.
You know, why just on this road is there?
And it wasn't just one little
tree just suddenly broken off and thrown across the trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this wasn't just one. So there'd be one tree down, right? And they weren't all in the same area. So there'd be a tree down, and then you go up a couple hundred more yards away, which is quite a ways away, and there'd be another one down, and then you go up, you know, another, half a mile or whatever, and then there's another one down. But they're only horizontal across the road, so you can't get across the road, and there's no other trees laying down anywhere. So tell me what that's all about.
That's It things that make you go, I mean, that's it. I mean, that's interesting. A lot of what Bigfoot research is for me is we come up with exclusionary evidence. You know, we can tell a lot of things that it's not, but we can't necessarily say we can't definitively say, oh, that was Bigfoot, because like Montra said, if you didn't see Bigfoot do it, now if there's corroborating evidence that may lead to a more, you know, a stronger picture or leaning that way, if you find footprints, if you find long hairs sticking on something, you know, then you put a single piece of evidence, interesting, you know, we've had weird stuff happen in the woods that I can't explain by any known animal, but in our research area, and I'm like, yeah, I've had a lot of weird stuff happen, but none of it can I say, you know, I can 100% attributed to Bigfoot. Just weird stuff. It goes in weird audio. And,
that is important, because people want to see what they want to believe is out there, which I understand. But as Montra said, if you don't see something happening, you can't 100% attribute it to a Bigfoot.
Right.
Yeah, well, people go out with confirmation bias. They go out and expect to have something happen that is related, or they want it to happen, so they project that onto onto the evidence.
I'm sure there's a lot of things out there that we don't know. I mean, like you said, we don't know what does it. We just see things and we put it together like a puzzle. And when it comes up short and it just doesn't make sense, you're just kind of scratching your head and you're like, you know. But like you said, you can't pinpoint what it is, but you just find it interesting, fascinating, you know.
You know, there were a couple incidents too. When Kathy and I were going out, we had one area that we were focusing on for a while that we had done some call blasting, and we were kind of stationed out in the dark and waiting to see what happened. And we were there for a few hours, and then we left, and we went back in the morning. And right where we were, there were a whole bunch of snapped, broken, big trees that weren't anywhere else in that area. It was just right there. So we don't know what that was. All we know is we pissed something off. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, didn't like us call blasting out there that night, because there was no inclement weather that night or that morning. There was nothing. And those trees, the sap had barely even begun to warm out of them. I mean, it was just, they were really fresh. It had just happened. We had the same thing happen up when we were doing some investigating up in the Lake Tahoe area at this particular spot. Same thing. We went next morning, and there were trees right in the same area where we were that were huge. I mean, one of them, I remember it was gigantic. It was like about as big around as a person, and it was just wrenched. Well, maybe not that big. It was probably about, what is that? Maybe
about telephone pole size.
Yeah, maybe like a telephone pole size, but it was broken and twisted, and it's like, I don't even think you could do that unless you ran your car into it or something, really. I mean, it was just amazing. I don't know of anything that has that kind of strength. I mean, unless it was way up high in the top of it and somehow broke it by it fall. I don't know. I don't know. I'm no scientist when it comes to that, but there's always strange stuff. And yeah, I mean, basically everything is inconclusive unless you see that creature actually doing it. So it you know, your chances, if you've got sort of DNA evidence like hair or something that you can actually collect and have run, and then of course then it's like, okay, well, the probability is a lot higher, but still, it's we can't prove anything basically. So
yeah, but it's building when you're researching particular areas, and those areas have a history of sightings, footprints, and it leads credence to at least staying in that area and collecting more evidence. And then something happens, like you happen to be out on a snowmobile looking for Bigfoot, and you get some pictures. I mean, that's like I said, it is. If you hear me talk, I like to say, we're looking for a needle in the haystack, but the needle's moving. I mean, that's you're out there in the woods, and you hope the best we can do is go shrink the haystack. Is find an area that has a history and an ongoing activity, and go back to that area as frequently. And it sounds like you guys are out in this, in your research areas as much as anybody is probably out investigating Bigfoot, and hope that you find, the Holy Grail. And like I said, obviously these pictures now. Before the show, I was talking to Todd, and he was telling me some information about what they can do, the technology that exists in regards to what happens when you take a picture with your cell phone, and how that can be. Todd, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I spoke with a good friend of mine and a fellow researcher, a gentleman by the name of John Cordell. He is a retired Portland police detective, and he's part of a small group of researchers to include Peter Byrne that we've been working with. And when he saw these pictures, the first thing that came to his mind was a gentleman he knows that is a criminal forensic expert. What he had told us is that most cell phones, regardless of whether they say it has a Carl Zeiss lens or a Sony lens or whatever, that can produce 1.2 megapixels or whatever, in reality, the software in these phones are by default designed to compress the photos in such a way, kind of like a zip file, if you will, to compress the data in those pictures to where what you see on your camera when you go to look in your photo gallery is largely a compressed version of the photo. They for instance, I think concept is that if you take a picture of a kid at a birthday party, you don't need 1.2 megapixels. On the majority of the pictures we take, we don't need that kind of clarity, and they want to preserve storage space. So the software in most phones compress those files to where if your viewers will look at a lot of the photos they've taken with their cameras, regardless of what it says it's capable of, it might say it's 98 kilobytes if you go to the properties of the picture, for instance. And it takes a forensic expert to be able to exploit and pull out that data to get it back to the original clarity and definition of that photo. So what John was suggesting, and actually Peter Byrne and John utilized this particular individual who lives in Bend, Oregon, on what they call the OG photo. There was a gentleman whose last name was Og, who had a picture of what he swore up and down was a Bigfoot. And John, because of his police background, was able to get this gentleman to turn his phone over for a short time to this forensic expert. And again, for instance, if somebody's accused of a crime, they'll come in and take their hard drives and their phones and everything and go through it all. This is what this guy does. And it takes a person like this to actually pull out this data to its original format, where the pictures you see on your phones, and I think we all deal with this when we talk about quote-unquote blob squatch photos. You know, somebody sees something, and with their naked eye, it's very clear, and then they take a picture of it, and it's just not as clear as their own vision. Well, fact of the matter is, with this kind of forensic technology, this data can be extracted from the phone and brought back to its original clarity, which in many cases can be anywhere from 10 times to 100 times clearer through this process. It's not, you know, there's obviously a cost involved, but I think your listeners, need to appreciate the fact that if they take a picture of something and it's not as clear as what they saw, that there is the capability within their phone and through the offices of forensic expert like this particular gentleman, that it can be enhanced and brought back to that 1.2 megapixel clarity. So I put Montra in touch with one such individual, and we're hoping that perhaps she can arrange to get that data in those pictures brought to full clarity.
That'd be awesome. Because I had the opportunity to see them, but I was looking at them originally on a cell phone, so it's limited a little. It's a small picture, and it's like, holy, excuse my language, crap. I mean, that's you're like, wow, you can really look. I mean, without getting any red pens out, I could see what looked like a face. It's like, wow, those are pretty. There's a lot of crap on the internet as what people put out as as Bigfoot pictures, and in my opinion, looking at these pictures, I mean they are way above what you usually see on the internet for pictures of people purportedly taking. The idea, and people need to pick up on what Todd is saying, is that if you have pictures that you think you took on your phone and they should have been clear, there is a process that can be done to those pictures to revert them back to the original quality of picture that you would expect it to have. So hopefully, I mean, if that's something you guys are looking at taking advantage of, Kyle and Montra?
Yeah, we've been talking about it. I have to contact the guy. I haven't done it yet, but I need to contact him and see what the cost is and all that. So, but definitely want to explore them. Yeah, for sure. So.
I think it's very interesting. Now, I only learned this maybe a week or two back, but my God, I think of all the blob squatches we've seen, and people feeling it necessary to draw red lines around things and stuff. There's a lot of data out there already that can potentially be rendered back to its original format. And the way John described it, it's like if you take a picture and you've got, most pictures are done in red, green, blue hues. So when it goes to store it, it'll store all the reds and the blues and the greens in a stack, if you will, as data. And that's what you get to see when it comes out on your camera. Through a forensic expert, he can break those out and put those red, greens, and blues in their original context, in their original format, and you're not going to get the pixelization that you do on your phone. When you get a phone picture and then you try to zoom in on it, it's all screwed up. So it just makes me wonder how many pictures out there that may be very legitimate, but may not, in its current format on your phone, be clear. I just can't help but think how many of those pictures, if they were brought back to their original enhancement, that they may show a lot more than what we've been seeing.
Just real quick, is there a resource that you said you had that people could actually contact if they have pictures that they feel are worthy? Not that we want to swamp somebody with a bunch of blob squatches.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pull it up on my phone here, but
okay.
And I know Monson has it.
We'll post the link at the underneath the episode so people can check it out. But go ahead,
That's
Montra.
probably
You
the
had
best
something.
Yeah, I was just wondering, just a random thought here, but Todd, do you know if they can also do that with like old footage, like the Patterson footage? Can it be frame by frame, or is it just like modern day type photography as far as like cell phone?
They've actually done that. I was at I wouldn't call it a conference, but a meeting up in Olympia at a museum where Bob Gimlin was and a few other folks, and I'm trying to remember the gentleman that was doing this work, but the same kind of thing applied to the Patterson Gimlin film, which was the Kodachrome 2. And there is a process in which they can, it's actually laid down in the red, green, blue format. And so what they did as an experiment was they had some sort of technology where they were able to strip away each color level, if you will, and try to sit on each of those color levels. And some of the stuff they were able to do with even 1967 Kodachrome 2, we think, well, that's what it is back then, but and there's not, you can't add anything to what they had, but in fact, technology today is growing in leaps and bounds. And I remember seeing the red, a version of the red, the green, and the blue layers of the Kodachrome 2, and each of them brought out certain details, certain artifacts that you wouldn't see in the composite picture, if you will.
Interesting.
Okay.
We could have gone on for 2 or 3 hours. This is what I kind of show that I like, when it feels like we're just sitting around the campfire talking about Bigfoot stuff. It's but you guys did go back and do a follow-up investigation of the area. What made you guys decide to leave when you got a Bigfoot standing in front of you in front of a tree? That's what you believe you're looking at.
It was kind of a stare down, basically. I mean, it was frozen. It was not moving. And we're just standing there, or not standing there, but we're on the snowmobile sitting there, and it's kind of like, okay, now who's going to make the first move? Who's going to blink first,
And it's the end of the day. It's the end of the day, and the sun's going down. I mean, it was at the very end of the day. We only had probably about another 20 minutes of light, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's there. So that's a good. Yeah, I don't know if I want to be outweighed the Bigfoot in the dark.
No. Well, one thing I really wanted to ask you, Montra, is these photos you took, there appears to be different angles to it, or maybe just different lighting, but there's certain artifacts in the photos that, in the one I really like, and what I was looking for, what Diane and I were looking for in the original, the one we really like was there's this like red branch. Well, in one there's like a tree laying left to right at a 45-degree angle in between you and the animal, and then in another picture that tree's not even in there. Did you back up a little bit more? Did you? I mean, what do you account for the differentiation between the photos?
We pulled it, so we had backed up, and then when we were kind of like, well, what do we do now? I guess go. I don't know.
You were getting different angles at it.
Yeah, I was getting different angles because we were going forward, back up and stopped. As we were leaving, we were just crawling going forward. So I was snapping more pictures then. So that's why there's some different things there. So because I was thinking leaving, it might move, but it didn't.
Well, let me just say this, if I will. Diane and I, when we first saw these pictures, and knowing you as well as we do, and knowing how credible you are, it inspired us so much that we both looked at each other and said, we need to get up there. And we did so to the extent that we pooled our money and contacted an individual in Randall, which is kind of on the way up there, and that was selling a snowmobile and a trailer, and we went up there on a whim that this sled was in as good a shape as the gentleman said it was, and we plopped down $3,400 of our money to get up there and go in there with you, and it was a great adventure. It was great to get with you. I was able to extrapolate the GPS coordinates from the actual picture. A lot of people don't know, if they got their GPS on and they take a photo somewhere, that if you go to the properties in a photo, the cell phone will actually give you the coordinates. And so based on that, when we saw where I went on Google Earth and plugged those coordinates in, and it showed us generally where you guys were at when you had that sighting. And so when we went out there, we attempted, Diane had a GPS unit with her, and we attempted to get to that exact GPS coordinate. And we went back and forth with it and tried to lock onto it. We took some pictures. I don't know where we got the exact same spot, but anyway, I was so inspired, we were, that we invested that money to come up there and join you folks, and we're just grateful that you welcome us to do that. So thank you for that.
Well, we're just so happy you guys are such good friends of ours, and that's very flattering, Todd and Kyle and I both.
We really appreciate that.
We really appreciate that a tremendous amount, more than you'll ever know. I mean, you guys have just volumes of experience too. That, you know, I mean, when we team up and stuff, it's a great thing because we're all on the same page. It's important when you're out doing research too that you all have the same goal in mind, and it's you know, just to gather evidence. Basically, we're not out there to do anything that could be regrettable, and so, you know, if it turned out to be a guy in a monkey suit, well, you know, nobody wants blood on their hands. But
well, I think a lot of that was based on the conditions and whatnot, and as we found out, there's no way you could even walk around out there, especially that time of year, because the snow was so soft that well, Kyle, how many times did you sink in up to your hips?
Remember that?
I mean,
we both got stuck.
Well, we actually got both of our sleds stuck at one point, and if it wasn't for Kyle, we'd still be up there.
Diane and I were looking pretty good too.
Well, guys, we're just about out of time. So the result of the investigation, or going back up there, I mean, obviously you couldn't get the location to size comparisons, and do you have a pretty good idea? So you have the GPS coordinates that come up when you take the picture. So your plan is to go back up there when the weather is more cooperative and conducive to look around the area at least and try to find that tree where the picture was taken?
Yeah, and we did. I mean, we were looking at the coordinates, and we stopped at 3 different places. I think it was at least 3 different places that the coordinates were coming up. But because of the snow melting and everything, and things move around out in the forest. Things don't just stay exactly the same in the forest. There's a lot of things that go on in the forest. And we were in that general area. I mean, we were right there, so there was not. But it was, like I said, everything was melted, and it looks different when you have all that snow and then everything melts. Things look different.
Yeah.
So, but we were in the coordinates of that area. We were in the coordinates of that.
But we'll be back up there.
Where certain branches might be in the picture because they may have, say, snow on them and making them drop further down. As the snow melts, those branches pop out of the picture. But our goal was to try to find that location just to eliminate the possibility that whatever was in the picture was, A, either gone or B was still there, and then hopefully we could be able to, just decide from that whether or not, what it was they were seeing. But yeah, absolutely, we do intend to go back up there, and we can do it with very shortly by motor vehicle, and we'll be up there again. And again, I hats off to Kyle and Montra for sharing that with us, and we look forward to working with them again in the future.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it too. It's great. So
I want to thank you all, Kyle and Montra and Todd and Diane, for joining me today here on Monster X and sharing. I always talk about cooperation versus competition, but I appreciate you guys joining us today, and let us know what happens with you get back up there. Again, where can people find the photographs? You have a website?
we have a Facebook page right now. A website we haven't developed yet, but if they want to just check it out, they can go to Columbia Sasquatch on Facebook and take a look.
Awesome. And Todd and Diane have the American Primate Conservancy. Todd and Diane, for people that want to find out more about the Conservancy and its goals and support it if they'd like financially, where can they go to find out more information?
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have the American Primate Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization that can be found at americanprimate.org.
Well, thanks, everybody. I'd like to also thank Todd and Diane Neiss for joining us today. It's the quietest that I think I've ever been around Diane, and but at least Todd will take the smack for that. Thanks, everybody, for being with us today on Monster X. We'll have a brand new show next week, and like I said, go check out Monster Exclusive on our website, www.monsterxradio.com. Until next week, have a great week.
Thank you for joining Monster X Radio.
Advancements in technology, shifting markets, and the gig economy are changing the nature of work. With this in mind, Harvard Business School Executive Education is launching a new program on managing the future of work. Based on the latest research into the forces reshaping workforce demographics, this program is designed to help employers remain competitive by thinking strategically about today's evolving business landscape. Learn more at hbs.me/future. That's hbs.me/future.